Hello, once again, Pastor Zach Bible Nuggets here, welcoming you into another episode, another week, another chapter. And today we are going to look into a story that is very familiar, probably with your own life. Have you ever dealt with something and you feel like my father dealt with this? You know, the people who have gone before you had the same challenge. You know, something in the family that keeps bothering you, bothers your father, probably your grandfather, probably your brothers and sisters. You are dealing with the same thing, something that keeps recurring and recurring. You know, maybe there is a marriage or divorce issue in the family. There is something to do with lies. There's something to do with infidelity, something just peculiar about your family. You know what? You're not alone, because this is the story of Isaac. As much as he was God's chosen one, and in fact, under him and through his descendants, we have Jesus Christ born, he dealt with this kind of stubborn problems in the family. You know, he's running away from famine just like his father. In fact, the chapter 26 starts with that. There was a famine. So the same thing that his father dealt with. Some of these things are informed either by our character or our environment, because we are living in the same environment that our fathers lived. You know, there are those territorial issues that we deal with. And Isaac is dealing with such a thing. But this chapter basically talks about God's covenant, faithfulness of God. Human conflict is also part of the context here, and obedience to God, and also divine provision. Those are the key themes in Genesis chapter 26. We'll be looking at the summary of the chapter. So I'll go through an overview, and then we'll go back into the chapter and touch a few verses, trying to keep this as short as possible. So a famine struck in the land, and Isaac is considering to leave to go to Egypt, but God instructs him not to go and to remain in Gerar. That's where he is living. And God reaffirmed to Isaac the covenant that was made to Abraham. What is this covenant that we are talking about? It was the promise about the land of Canaan, the numerous descendant promise. You remember that God promised Abraham, and also the major promise that all nations will be blessed through his offspring, because Abraham obeyed God. And we said this blessing of all nations is about Jesus Christ. So Isaac basically remains in Gerar, and out of fear, he is afraid, just like we said, his father also was afraid that he would be killed, so that men of Egypt would take his wife. And also when he came to the land of Philistines, he again cheated about his wife Sarah and said, "It's my sister." And this time, it was not the men who are interested in his wife. It was actually the king, Abimelech. The Bible mentions Abimelech now in the chapter 26, when we are talking about Isaac. And 90 years earlier, the Bible also talked about Abimelech. And so that tells us not only Abimelech and Phicol. That tells us that that is probably a title and not the name of the king, just like there was Pharaoh. So there is Abimelech and there is Phicol. Isaac lies and says that this is my sister. And this time, God is not going to do the dirty work of, coming through the dreams. So Isaac is saying, "This is my sister," and the king happens to be looking around, and he sees Isaac actually caressing his wife, and he's like, "No, that is not like brother and sister relationship," and he rebukes him. You know, have you ever been rebuked by an unbeliever? You are a believer yourself, and you do something, and somebody comes and tells you, "Aren't you a Christian?" And "Why did you say that? Why did you do that? Why did you behave like that?" They remind you that you are actually a Christian. They remind you of your faith. They remind you of whom you are supposed to be. They remind you of how you are supposed to behave. And this is what happened to Isaac. So he says, probably they are going to kill me, and so I'm going to say, "This is my sister." He says so of Rebecca, his wife. And then Abimelech sees something romantic, and he says, "No, this can never be." And so he rebukes him. The other thing we are told is that he prospered in the land, and so he sowed and reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. His wealth also increases, And this is very good material to highlight here, because after Isaac, we'll be talking about Esau, we'll be talking about Jacob. And these two people, we need to compare their character and we need to compare their environment. So it is very important to note that Isaac is actually a very rich man. In fact, down the line, we are going to see him entering into an agreement with King Abimelech, which we said Abimelech is a title and not a name, probably, because the difference between the 90 years when he appeared to Abraham and when he appears to Isaac for the same reasons and the same name, that tells us probably that it's not the same person. Because you remember at this time when we are talking about this chapter, people are not living into the tune of 200 years or so. They are living 100 plus. That is post the floods. So Isaac moved to the valley of Gerar, so he's not going to run away from the famine. And in fact, God tells him, don't go, but he tells him, stay here. And so he starts farming, and despite the famine, he will go into the field, he's going to till it, and he's going to have a bountiful harvest. So he moves to the valley of Gerar because he became too powerful. After being so productive in his farming and his livestock keeping, he looks like a threat to the king. And the king says, get out of our land, go and stay somewhere else. You are becoming too powerful. And so Isaac leaves the land of the Philistines and goes and stays at the valley of Gerar and reopened his father's wells. That tells you that his fathers had wells there, and you remember he was living in Beersheba, so he had wells there. And this is the same place actually where Abraham met Abimelech, and they had a treaty. And when they were doing the treaty, he was like, now let this be a reminder that he dug a well, he called it Beersheba, and then he dug a well as a reminder. And they also set an agreement between him and Abimelech that they are not going to rise against each other. And indeed, that this well called Beersheba is his own property. So Isaac is going back to where his father had that kind of a vow with the king. So he goes there, and we are told he starts digging wells. The first well was called Esek, and he named it Esek to imply that it was one that had quarrels, or they quarreled about. He moved into the second one, and he dug another one. He called it Sitina, because he named it so because it had opposition. And then finally he got one that had no quarrel, that had no opposition, and he called it Rehoboth. Rehoboth saying that God had made room for them to flourish. You know, you probably have been dealing with something and you feel like, I've tried a lot, and you know, everything that I'm doing doesn't seem like to work, doesn't seem to materialize. It's like I'm having too much opposition. You know what? You are not alone, because Isaac was in this kind of a situation. You know, you do one thing, you think you have succeeded, and before long the enemies rise up. But we are going to be seeing that actually God is going to use quarrel and opposition. He's going to use Esek and Sitina. Those are names of that implies about quarrel, and that implies opposition. And then he's going to move. Before he digs the third one, before he digs the third one, the Bible tells us that he moved a little bit further, and then he dug another one and called it Rehoboth, meaning that it is the quarrel and the opposition that pushed him to the right position. And actually, this is where God wanted him to be, like we are going to be looking at some of the verses that I'm going to highlight later. So Isaac then went to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared again, saying, fear not. And remember again, after Abraham had defeated the kings that he went into battle with, he went and stayed somewhere, and I believe he was in deep thoughts and thinking about, what about if they come and turn against me? What about if they decide to retaliate? What will become of me now that I don't even have a son? And he's thinking deep about these things, and God comes to him and says, fear not. And I'm going to tell you the same today. Probably you're dealing with something major and you are feeling like, of all the blessings that God has given me, they don't make sense until I've got this one, until I'm able to achieve this one. And you are feeling like there is no hope because there is no sign that is going to happen. And so God appears at that kind of a moment. And he tells him, fear not, you have defeated the kings. And then Abraham is like, I don't get what you're saying. Defeating kings is one thing, but it doesn't mean much, because even though I have got a lot of property, even though I'm richer than the kings themselves, being richer than a city, but still I don't have a heir. So God tells him, no, I'm going to give you Isaac. And it is at this place that is called Beersheba that God met with Abraham and told him, fear not. So when we are talking about history repeating itself in your family, when you're talking about history repeating itself in the family, probably not just in a bad way, but there are things that keep coming back to us in the family line that are also good. God have blessed you in your family, and you are musicians, you are preachers, you are businessmen, you are politicians in your family, and you move from the shadow of your ancestors or your fathers into your own life with a lot of ease, because there is a bridge, there is a place to go by, there is a place you pass with ease. This is what is happening to Isaac also. But of importance, it is the same place called Beersheba. So Isaac went to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared again, saying, fear not, for I am with you. Isaac built an altar, worshipped and pitched tent, and dug another well. Abimelech later came seeking peace, and the same thing happened again. I'll remind you that Abimelech actually came seeking for peace between himself and his city and Abraham, because Abraham was so powerful and he was feeling he needs to have a peace treaty with him. We looked at that earlier. So they made a covenant and shared a meal, again happening like it happened to Abraham. The same day, Isaac's servants found water, confirming God's provisions. Sometimes God will give us a sign to show us that He's together with us. But also remember, there are times when God will be quiet. You want God to speak and you are wondering, will you ever speak to me, God? You are looking for Him, you are seeking Him, you cannot find Him. So there are times when God is not very visible. You cannot hear Him. Sometimes you are seeking Him and you feel all you're getting is silence. But there are other times when God will show a sign, like this time. So they have had a treaty, and before long, his men goes out and they find water, and like God to show them, I am going to be your provider. So the chapter ends on a troubling note, where we find Esau marrying Hittite women and bringing grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So overall, Genesis 26 reveals that God blesses obedience, provides room in times of conflict, and remains faithful to his servants. That said, I think it's only good to do the chapter more justice by going into some of the verses, like we said, without reading verse by verse. But I believe by the introduction I did, we were able to grasp the spirit and the letter of the chapter. So if you go into verses 4, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heavens. I'll give your descendants to all these. I'll give your descendants all these lands. So God is speaking to Isaac, and he's telling him, I'm going to give your descendant all these lands, not just what Abraham redeemed by way of buying by a price, but God is going to give him and his descendants the land of Canaan. You remember, we said that after Isaac is dead, Jacob is dead, and so many people down the line. After Isaac is dead and Jacob is dead now, and Moses is dead, And now Joshua is going to lead the Israelites to come back and actually conquer this land and take it over. So God says, I will bless you and I'll give this land to your descendants. So I just mentioned that to remind you that it actually happened. He also says, and by your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. We said that is about Jesus Christ, because it is through Jesus that we have salvation across the globe, across the globe. So because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, so my covenants, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac lived in Gerar, that is verse 6, but verse 7, I want to touch that. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister. That's where we are in verses 7. When we are talking about Isaac cheating or lying, that Rebecca is actually his sister. That is where it is in verses 7. And we are told the reason why. He was afraid that if I say you are my wife, thinking the men of the place will kill me on account of Rebecca, for she is beautiful. The same thing that happened about Sarah, actually 2 times. Abraham did this in Egypt, and he did it again in the land of the Philistine, and his wife was almost being taken over by Abimelech, the king. So if you look at verse 8, it came about when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of Philistines, looked out through a window. That's where we are talking about how God made Abimelech open his eyes and get to realize, no, this guy is cheating. This is not his sister, it is his wife. So verse 9, then Abimelech called Isaac, behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say she is my sister? So it's a rebuke that is coming from, it's a rebuke to the anointed, but it's being done by the unbeliever. And it can be very humiliating. I know sometimes you may have found yourself in such a place. I found myself there when you have done something and someone reminds you, aren't you a pastor? Aren't you a born-again Christian? You know, aren't you? And they'll remind you who you are. That is what the king is doing to Isaac. You are not supposed to be doing this because, you know better. In fact, he tells him, one of my people, that is verse 10, one of my people might easily have lain with your wife, and you have brought upon us guilt. So Abimelech charged all the people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. You know, actually the people that you are thinking you want to impress, or the people that you are thinking that they are going to work against you, God is able to turn them around to be your defense, to be your security. So Abimelech says, no one is going to take your wife. And in fact, I'm going to give a charge that whoever touches you or touches your wife shall surely be put to death. So he actually got a lot of security on that. And so verse 12, now Isaac sowed in that land and lived in the same year 100-fold. We mentioned that. I want to go to verse 14. For he had possessions of flocks and herds and great household, so that the Philistines envied him. You know, he has become so rich that the Philistines are envying him, and they are like, you know, this man is so great. And verse 14, so he had possessions of flocks and herds of great household, so that the Philistines envied him. If you go to verse 16, then Abimelech said to Isaac, if you look at verse 16, then Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us. You are too powerful for us. So the same person who was being afraid, and Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. You know, the same person who was afraid of being killed, the king is now saying, you are too powerful for us. You know, the stories that we tell ourselves, sometimes the stories that defeat us are not from the outside. They are from within us. What we think about ourselves, what we tell ourselves about ourselves. You know, when we are thinking, when we are meditating, when we are criticizing ourselves, when we are limiting ourselves in our minds, the stories we tell ourselves can be very limiting. Look at the kind of a story he has about himself, the kind of perspective, the kind of fears that he has. And also compare it with the kind of view that the king has about him. The king is saying, he said to Isaac, go away, not because we hate you, but because you are too powerful. So the king says, you are too powerful. Isaac is telling himself, I'm too weak. That's what I'm talking about, the stories that we tell ourselves. And it's good to protect our way of thinking. It's good to protect our minds so that we do not stay in a position of defeat, while actually we are conquerors. We are conquerors in Christ, and we are not limited as sometimes we want to tell ourselves. I want to encourage you that you're actually bigger than what you think, and I mean it. I have limited myself so many times, but when I appear into a place and I do something, I put my best foot forward, I realized, like, oh, you know what? I'm actually better than whom I thought were actually the heroes were actually the pros in a certain area, in business, even in meetings. You want to go somewhere and you're like, this person is on another level. But it's you telling yourself that if you go there and you put your best foot forward, you realize that there is something in you that is so unique than what you can see in any other person. Why? Because it was wired, designed, and calibrated just to fit whom you are. You can unleash it where it matters, and it will make a lot of difference. It will make you stand out even where you never thought that you can actually do that. If you look at verse 23, then he went up from there to Beersheba. The Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham. He was avoiding to get out of Gerar, but he's pushed. Opposition and hatred has pushed him out, and he has gone exactly to where that God wanted him to be. I don't know whether you have ever been expelled by things that you thought were very unfortunate, that you thought they were very bad. You felt like people, went against you at your place of work. They spoke ill of you. They had hatred, they had opposition, and they pushed you out against your will. And when you are going out, you're feeling like you can curse someone. But it doesn't happen always just because something is wrong. It happens sometimes because God wants to take you to a different level. And I invite you to believe this with me, that God actually can take you to where you belong through very unpleasant means and unpleasant vessels that you board. You want to go to a place, but you get there through very unpleasant, very uncomfortable means. Welcome to the plans of God. Welcome to the ways of God of doing things. He does not always do things the way we want, the way we think, the way we would imagine. Sometimes he will use hatred, he will use contention, he will use strife, he will use famine to get you out. And whatever it costs God, he will take you to where you belong. And you know what? When you are there, you will look back and say, thank God that this happened. Thank God that I was patient. Thank God that I didn't quit. Thank God that I came this far. I pray that God gives you the grace to go the farthest that you need to get to, so that your blessings will not be hindered in any way. If you look at what God says in verse 24, the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, which night? The same night that he moved. The word same night here is to relate the occurrence that has happened earlier, which is moving to Beersheba, and what has happened about his interaction with King Abimelech. And if you look at his words when he's talking to King Abimelech, he says, you chased me away because you hated me. But the king is saying, no, that is not the case. You are too powerful for us. Compare those two. You feeling like, no, I think you hated me. And they are saying, no, we didn't hate you. We were afraid. We were fearful of our own lives. Why? Because to us, you appear very, very powerful. Just like I'm saying, the stories we tell ourselves. He's saying, I am hated by you people. In fact, that's the reason why you chased me. And they are here telling him, look at it better, look at it in a different way. You know, someone said that the coin has three sides, actually not so two sides. Sometimes we look at the head, we look at the tail, but we forget the ring by the side. So Isaac is looking at one side, he's looking at the tail, probably looking at the head. You know, you said, go away, we don't want you here. But the king comes and follows after him and says, you know what? The reason why we said that is because you are very powerful. And actually we have come so that we have an agreement, a vow, a treaty that you will not rise against us. Just like we told you to go away without touching you, without hurting you. Promise us that you are also not going to hurt us. You know, this person is thinking, this powerful man chased me away. On the other hand, the powerful men have come to tell him, you are so powerful. Please promise us that even when you are out of our land, you are not going to turn against us and to attack us. Why? Because from our eyes, we see that you are so powerful. And I want to tell you the same thing. You are powerful than you can imagine. So the promise that God is talking about, I'm the God of your father Abraham. This is what God says. Do not fear, for I am with you. So God repeats the same words that he told Abraham and has told Isaac earlier. Do not fear, for I am with you. And I'm going to tell you the same words as we come almost to the conclusion of this chapter. Do not fear, for the Lord is with you. If you believe in God, you don't have to fear, for the Lord is with you. I will bless you. I will multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So if you go back to, if you allow me to touch just a few more verses, if you look at verse 25, so he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. The reason why I'm mentioning this verse is because he's doing exactly as his father had trained him to do, by way of practice and probably also by way of coaching, even verbally. So he's becoming a good student of his father. Down the line, in his two sons, we are going to see a contrast between Jacob and Esau, and that is what we are going into in the next chapter. And even this chapter will give us a good opportunity to put them one against the other, to see who actually becomes a student of Isaac as the father. And indeed it is Jacob, but Esau goes on the contrary. And I want to take you back to Genesis 21 verses 30 to 32. This is what the Bible says. He said, you shall take these 7 ewe slabs from my hand. Who is that? It is Abraham talking to Abimelech. So this is history repeating himself in Isaac's time, that it might be a witness to me that I dug this well. And this well we are reading here in Genesis 21 is the same one that Isaac is now in. Therefore he called the place Beersheba, because there the two of them took an oath. Verse 32, so they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, arose and returned to the land of the Philistines. And we said once again, this Abimelech and Phicol are titles, not names of people. And that's it about what happened between Isaac and Abimelech, just like it happened to him and his father. The last two verses now shifts the chapter into a different story altogether. If you look at verse 34, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, and daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. In the next chapter, we are going to be measuring so much between Jacob and Esau, and we want to understand, why are things happening to Esau the way they are happening? Why are things happening divinely to Jacob the way they are happening? So we are told that Esau was 40 years old when he married Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite. So we are told about this marriage. So he has married two girls, and where are they coming from? These are descendants of Ham and Canaan. And you remember the story of Ham and Canaan? You remember their curse after the floods by their father Noah. There was something that happened there. The Bible doesn't put it very clearly, but it puts the theme into something that looks like a sexual experience that happened, and so Canaan was cast. So these two girls are coming from that lineage. And down the line, we are also going to see Esau go even to get a third wife, and this time is going to take the daughter of Ishmael, Hagar's son, Abraham's son, and so he's going to take another wife again from there. But look at what Isaac does. If you compare their stories with Isaac, Isaac follows the trend of the family. Remember what Abraham said about Isaac? Do not get my son Isaac, talking to the servant that he was sending back to Mesopotamia. Do not get my son away from these Canaanite women. These are the people who are living in this area, the Hittites that are mentioned. And these are the people that Esau actually married, two of them. And you're going to see, so when Jacob wants to marry, Isaac and Rebecca have had a bad experience. They don't like what they are experiencing with these Hittite women. And so they say, Jacob must not get a wife again from this area. He must go back to our family and get a wife from there. So he actually goes back by himself. He does not have a servant go for him. He does not go with his father. He goes by himself. And we are going to be seeing that story in the unfolding chapters. So the contrast here seems very intentional. Isaac's marriage, advanced God's promise, but Esau's marriage actually grieves the carriers of the promise. The other thing that we can conclude here is that Esau acts very impulsively. He has no mentorship. He does not take counsel. It is like he decides what to do. I decide to marry, I marry. I decide to add another wife, I will add. I decide to take the third one, I will take the third one. That is the kind of a picture that we are getting. It is very important to get note of these characteristics of these two people and contrast them, or compare and contrast them, because in the next two chapters, we are going to depend on this comparison to understand what is happening to each and every one of them, because there are going to be repercussions and there are going to be results of what they are and whom they are. Their character is going to portray and it's going to display something in the near future. So he acts impulsively, he values immediate desires, he aligns with the Canaanite culture. And if you look at Jacob, though he has flaws, especially because he cheated his father, it's good to call things the way they are. That was wrong. But though that is the way it is, we are also going to see him linked to the covenant line of Abraham. He seeks for a wife from his kinsmen in Mesopotamia. The distinction matters because the promised line would continue through Jacob and not through Esau. So the reason why I'm highlighting that is because we need to understand it in that perspective. Now, the other thing I want to mention, and we'll be coming back to this in the next chapter, is about who is this Esau? What is the character? And we said earlier that one of the people that have helped us to understand the Old Testament scriptures is Paul. And I want us to read in the book of Hebrews. Let there be no immoral or godless person like Esau, who sold his own birthright for a single meal. For you know that even afterwards, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought for it with tears. There are people who think that Esau actually was mistreated or mishandled. But on the other hand, even in terms of how he marries, it is not so much about whom he marries, but about what his heart is like. His marriage is a showcase of what kind of a heart he has, what kind of a person is he. Where you show your interest. If I want to know what kind of a person you are, when you spend hours in a soccer pitch, we get to understand you love soccer. When you spend your time like reading, you are a bookman. When you spend your time singing. We know you are a musician. And so when we are talking about the marriage of Esau, it's not so much about whom he marries, but so much about what is the motivation towards that. It is, of course, coming from his character. So basically what the Bible is telling us here is that Isaac's marriage advanced God's promise, while Esau's marriage actually grieved those who are carrying the promise. So when Paul says that let there be no immoral person like Esau, it sounds like it's an attack to the person of Esau, but he's just, digging deep into what kind of a person is this, the person who sold their birthright. Actually, as much as his brother meant to take it from him, he also, the Bible says that he despised it. So the reason why he was able to give it out is not because he was hungry, but because he despised his birthright. I pray that God will help us to value our faith, value our heritage in faith, because we are children of Abraham by faith. It is only by faith, not because we are Jews. Probably you are hearing me and you are not one of them. Personally, I'm not. Probably a Gentile like me. But the reason why we have a place in the kingdom of God is because we are children of Abraham by faith. And through him, the whole nation, the whole earth shall be blessed. How? Through Jesus Christ. So I want to invite you to know this Christ that we are talking about. Probably we've been mentioning about Christ and saying that, the Abrahamic blessing. We're talking about the seed of the woman who is Jesus Christ. And you are saying like, I have not believed him. I want to invite you into believing, and not only to believing, but also to confess. The Bible tells us that we believe with our hearts and also we confess with our mouths. So I want to welcome you. Probably you're there and you're saying, I believe this word so much, but I have a problem. I don't want to go confessing. I want to tell you it's not complete until you confess. So I invite you to confess, because I know there are so many people who believe, but they fall short of confessing. And you know what the Bible says? That when you do that, you will be saved. So actually, I'm inviting you to salvation because you have believed. And probably what you need to do is to confess. When you confess, then you are saved. Actually, that is the easiest definition and easiest description of what salvation is. It is believing. After you believe, it is confessing. After you confess, you're saved. And so when you're saved, you keep confessing. That is what we mean when we say that we are saved and we are born again. God bless you. See you again. Next time, we are going to look into chapter 27 about the stolen blessing, the popular story of stolen blessing. And we are going to dig it up, turn it upside down, and get to understand, was it really stolen? And was it really taken over? Was it stolen? Was it hijacked? We said this was kind of a very dysfunctional family. The family of Isaac and his wife Rebekah and their two sons, Jacob and Esau. They were very, very broken. It was a broken family. And we are going to look deeper into that and get to understand, was it stolen? Was it captured, divinely turned into who actually it belonged to? See you next time as we look deeper into that. God bless you and keep safe.